Hey, we're back to wrap up Flexique on wafer paper. As always, there are other episodes back in Flexique Fridays you can check out if you need to. Last time we tried to rejuvenate some Flexique over wafer paper that was a little bit stiffer than we wanted. Remember, we put it in water, dabbed it off, and then added another coat of Flexique to it. I wanted to show you what it looked like after a few weeks. It's still very flexible. So that's a way to fix an issue that you might have with Flexique on wafer paper. The other thing is we talked about Flexique being able to be reused. Any excess that you cut can be just gathered up, put into a silicone container, re-melted and reused. Well, after a little bit of experimentation, we found that you can do something very similar to Flexique on wafer paper. The result is it gives you a bit of a textured look to your spread. There is a video that I referenced down in the comments that walks you through that process. I'm going to show you a little bit here. This was a piece of Flexique over wafer paper that I used just a little while ago. Pretend it's a cut, a trim off of something you were using, and you don't need it anymore. All right. So what we can do is just plop it into a silicone container. And then what I'm going to do is, just for the heck of it, I'm going to add a tad of color, rainforest color to it, to give it a little bit of depth. And the reason why I'm doing that, you'll see very shortly, is that if you wanted to do something like a reptile skin or a moss or a grass, this would be a good way to do it. Watch, I'm going to go warm it up a little bit, melt it, and be right back. Okay, so I'm back. Now, I admit that this is just a little bit that we're working with, but it gets you the idea of the picture. Okay, so when I melted it, you can see that it's got a bit of a glob effect to it. If I put it out onto my silicone sheet and spread it, look at that texture. So there you go. A little bit of mossy effect or skin effect. That's something you can do with any leftover Flexique on wafer paper to reuse it, rejuvenate it. Okay, so you remember we talked about Flexique can pick up textures off the texture sheets, right? So can Flexique over wafer paper. You can vary the amount of texture it picks up by the process you use. I've got a little bit of Flexique warmed up right here. Okay. I'm going to try two approaches. First of all, I'm going to put a little bit of Flexique into the texture sheet itself. Of course, this is clear. You can always color it first. And then I'm going to put a little bit of Flexique over wafer paper, and then put that wafer paper over the place that I put the Flexique on, and apply Flexique to the other side like this. There you go. So what that does is it actually pulls in that texture from the texture sheet, with the Flexique grabbing the full depth of the texture to transfer it on to the wafer paper. And as you can see, I'm pushing down with my brush so that I get the Flexique on wafer paper into those grooves of the texture. That's if I want a lot of texture on the Flexique on wafer paper. All right. The other thing you can do, if you wanted less effect, you can just coat your Flexique on the wafer paper like that, and apply it to your texture sheet, and put a little bit of Flexique over the wafer paper, but don't press so hard with the brush. Okay, you can see that it's picking up some of the texture, but not quite as deep as this one. So there's two ways of doing it. Flexique on wafer paper picks up textures. So I've got an example of some Flexique on wafer paper that I used in a grass mat texture sheet. Okay, I put it in there, colored it a little bit of tan, and then cut it into strips. And then you can weave the strips into a basket effect, which is what happened right here. You can see that because the strips are very flexible, it picks up the texture. You've got a nice little basket effect that you can use to create by using Flexique on wafer paper in texture sheets. All right, moving right along. So you know that icing sheets come in various versions, just like anything else in the industry. Some are thinner than others. We use icing images, icing sheets, which work really well with Flexique. Let me show you an example of one. Here we have Flexique covering an icing sheet that's got a printed effect on it that we used on a project recently. Okay, I'm gonna let that sit for a while and let it cure to touch before I remove the backing. It is important when you're using icing sheets to make sure that you remove that acetate backing as soon as it dries to touch. There's a tendency of the product, the Flexique product, to absorb into the icing sheet and then attach it to the acetate sheet to make it more difficult to remove that sheet. That's especially evident in the thinner icing sheets. So be watchful about that, word of caution. Okay, this is fairly cured. Let me trim it a little bit on the sides so that there's not a lot of overhang. All right, and now we can just take and remove it from the backing, and you've got a protected piece of icing sheet that's very flexible and not fragile. Now when that cures a little bit more, you can actually bend it and stretch it a bit without breaking it. So there you have Flexique over icing sheets. Okay, the next thing we're going to try is Flexique on Flexfrost sheets. I have a small piece here of a print on a Flexfrost sheet that I'm going to coat with Flexique. Again, don't drag it more than once or twice or you'll start pulling the image. So while that dries, let me show you something. I took a piece of Flexfrost sheet and then coated it entirely with Flexique. Pretend this is a printed Flexfrost sheet. You can coat the whole thing with Flexique. Now you see that it's a fairly even representation of Flexique over the Flexfrost sheet, right? The Flexfrost sheet is very flexible. That's part of the issue with Flexfrost is after a bit of time it'll go brittle. Not in this case, and this is several months old already. What I did to apply the Flexique on that is use the handy dandy wraplet. You remember that? We did that in a couple of episodes ago. Just poured the Flexique on it and then drug it to get a very even layer of Flexique on the Flexfrost. Here we have the Flexfrost sheet coated with Flexique, and that'll protect it and give it indefinite flexibility. So you can use this technique of Flexique on Flexfrost and put a fondant backing on it, which gives it a little bit of cushioning, a little bit of give. Then you can do an embossing technique to give it some life, make it pop on a cake. There's actually a class out there that shows that technique. Let me show you. So here's an example of Flexique on Flexfrost over fondant, which gives you an embossing look on the face, the eyes, And then you can use Flexique Instant Lace for the trim and make your roses pop by modeling chocolate with Flexique. An interesting class, look out for it. It's out there. All right, so I've trimmed this one a bit and it's set enough so that it doesn't come off when you touch it. I will show you that you can just pull it right off, pull the backing right off, and you've got your Flexfrost sheet that's very flexible now. And will stay that way. It won't ever get brittle. So there's Flexique on Flexfrost. And we talked about how you can use this technique for them. Okay, so that's Flexique on wafer paper, Flexique on icing sheets, and Flexique on Flexfrost sheets. All printed with images. The last thing you can do is print an image on a transfer sheet and then use Flexique. Simi Cakes actually has a transfer sheet that's used for isomalt. It works with isomalt because isomalt is hot. Well, those same transfer sheets could work with Flexique because you can make Flexique hot. Let me show you real quick. Okay, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you don't coat the acetate. You coat the actual print and product. So I've got some Flexique that I warmed up so it's very hot, and I'm just pouring it, spreading it right onto the transfer sheet. Now because it's hot, it's going to absorb and the image is going to transfer onto the Flexique. Then you can peel it right off and you've got your transfer right on to Flexique, which you can then put onto your cake. Okay, so I've trimmed the edges of this Flexique on semi-transfer sheets, and I just wanted to show you that it does very nicely pick up the pattern, the image from the back side. There it is. And look at that. Isn't that cool? Now you've got that image that can go right onto your cake. Both sides, and there's the shiny side. So you've got a shiny side and a matte side, and it picks up the image on the back side and it shines through because Flexique is clear and you can get the image all the way through. Isn't that really cool? Several different ways of dealing with edible printed media by coating them with Flexique for some added durability and flexibility. Alright, so that's it about Flexique on wafer paper. I know there's a lot of stuff, right? I hope it was useful to you. Next time we're going to start talking about Flexique Instant Lace. Now that's a topic that's very useful for cake decorating and of great interest to our audience, so make sure you tune in. Bye again till next time.